I'm going to continue to try to debug the bug that I found last time. I'm probably gonna have to take a lot of pauses because I still have no idea what it is. I have one thing that I want to try in the beginning, but I'm not sure if it's gonna work. So I'm thinking about testing a bunch of different things, doing experiments to see what happens when I comment out some certain things, and then see if I can figure out. But I'm pretty sure it's a memory leak, and I think it is related to the global signals class. So there was a problem on the global signals the last time that I was building it, and it was a problem related with the class DB. So I think that the global signals, but I don't remember if I solved that or not. But I do think it's possible that there is a problem with the class DB, but I don't think that's when it comes to this bug that I'm getting now, I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is the order, because in the way that I did the functions there, and this is the first thing that I have to try, which is that I probably have to put a condition on the emit signal, the first emit signal function, to check whether or not the signal was connected. So if there is signal or isn't. And if there isn't any signal connected, then I just return the function. So I think that's probably the first thing that I'm going to try to do. I'm going to put a timer and then take a break. Put some music for myself. So let me just run the timer already. When I do 2 hours and take a break, then I might continue or stop streaming and then continue upstream. I don't remember which test that I did. So the weird thing, one thing that I learned is that the way you stop events from propagating is by putting this function accept event, calling this function. So whenever you call this function after an event, it's going to make a Godot stop sending the event to other parts. And they have a chart there on the documentation of the hierarchy of importance. So I also changed the standard camera so that the functionality for the event is on this unhandled input function instead of the input, because that's the one that is going to determine, that's the one that is going to allow you to don't run the functionality whenever the event's blocked by something else, which is obviously what you want to do in most of the GUI elements probably. So you want when the event happens on the GUI, it has to be before the event on the camera, and it has to stop the event from propagating so that you don't interfere. So if you don't do this, then every time you change the slider, it's going to move the camera as well. And in order to be able to do this, you have to call this function here as well, either here or on the notification parts of the notification function on any part of the cycle, I think you want. But obviously it has to run before the process and notification process. So probably on the ready or on the same parts that the editor puts there, or on the node enter tree or something like that. So this one is going to make it call the unhandled inputs, and this one makes a call the input function for the node. This one makes the process makes the notification function run on the process parts of the cycle. And this one is for our shortcuts. So if you don't set those are as true, then it's not going to call. Even if you override the function from the node, it's not going to call. So those two things are solved. But here, I think the problem is, so the one thing that I realized is that, and that I changed to make it easier, because I thought the problem initially was because of the bind set parameter. So initially I thought that I had to pass as I had to specify the type as an object, and because the object is the only class that is subscribed on the variant. The variant class is the one that is used to translate the types. So it has a bunch of types there that it supports, and it overloads a bunch of operators on C++, so that is capable of doing the functionality for when you pass an object of that type, or an object that inherits from that type, is going to know how to convert, how to run the constructor and stuff like that, and allocate memory inside of the variant, so that the time you emit the event is able to retrieve that information and run the function with the correct types. So I thought that for that reason, I should probably put the, and also because I was getting some errors, I think last time that I did this. But then I tried to change the type there, and it still worked with parent set parameter instead of object, but it still didn't solve the issue, obviously. So I realized that I didn't, because initially I think I did it like this because I thought that I had to update everything on the graph components every time that something on the custom physics component changes. But now I realize that because it's only going to change one value at a time, and the custom physics component is composed of the physics sliders, which only send one signal at a time. It doesn't matter. I don't need to track the whole state on the. I don't even need to track the state on the custom physics because of the way the GUI element works on Godot. So the physics slider itself already has the state that it needs to update the slider and the value, and also emit the signal. So the custom signal is just like a manager of physics sliders. So the only thing I have to do is just route the data, which is just one at a time. Every time that you change the value on the slider, it sends a signal, and then I can send directly from the physics slider as well. I don't need to do it on the custom physics. And because of that, it's only going to send one value at a time that you're going to change. And that means that I can put the same functionality that I was doing in the custom physics on this Graph3D class, which means I can receive only the parameter name and the new value, and then I only update the value of the bind set parameter that's part of the Graph3D class. So I changed the types because of that here, but it's still not working. So I think I did some, I changed the order of the nodes. So I put the custom physics on top of the, on the bottom of the Graph3D, and then it was breaking the engine. It was breaking the editor, not even the game. So for that reason, I'm still not 100% sure, but I think for that reason, it makes sense that probably the issue is because of the order that, and this is the thing that I knew that it might be a problem, but I wasn't sure if I needed to do this now or think about this. For two reasons. One is because the emit signal, I did the global signals based on the emit signal, the normal signals functions. I just copied the emit signal parts because it's more complicated because of the variant class and all the types and templated stuff that they do to convert everything. And on that, when I was studying the signals, they have some comments there that are for the situations where a signal is emitted and then the object is deleted as the signal is emitted. And based on the comment, they say this is expected behavior. And then for that reason, they create a new memory to allocate for those cases. So maybe that's the reason. But since I'm doing the same function, I think that's probably not the issue. Or it might be the issue, actually. I'm not really sure. But I think it's something to do with this, with the order, because here, I think that the constructor is going to run depending on the order of the tree that you have the elements. So it's going to change the order that in which I connect and emits the signal. And here, so when the Graph3D is put on the tree first, then that makes more sense because it's going to connect the signal first, which is going to create the scope and the signal name. And then it's going to allow the other class to emit. But the weird thing is that this should only call the function, it should only emit the signal when the value of the slider changes. Because this function here is connected to the value changed event on the slider. But then this makes me think that this is probably the issue. So I'm going to test this now, I think. So I think that the reason why this is running automatically in the beginning, even though like I'm not changing the values of anything, these nodes are just are just being added on the tree, is that I think that under the hood, what the editor does, and probably what the engine does as well, when it puts these elements on the tree, there's probably an event that is going to run the value changed automatically, just set the default value of the slider. And this makes this function run, which emits the signal, and probably the emit the signal is the problem. Because then it tries to emit the signal and it doesn't, which is going to call back the function, but the Graph3D is not connected yet. Or the Graph3D class doesn't exist yet. That's the problem. So it's trying to call a function from a class that doesn't exist. I think that's the reason, and that's why it is like a dangling, it's not really a dangling pointer, but it's trying to access memory that doesn't exist. So that's probably the reason why this is not working. But then it's kind of weird because the only way for it should be able to do that is if the signal is connected already. So this is the kind of, so for that reason, I think I have to change this one. Because here, I did put the conditions here to check. So this is the weird thing. So it might not be this, might be something else, but if that was the reason, then like, it's a situation where the Graph3D is connected to the event because the event exists. But no, maybe it is that because I am getting a warning message there when I change the order of the nodes that are on the tree hierarchy. So when I put Graph3D on top of the custom physics, then it just gives a warning and doesn't crash, if I remember correctly. But if I do it the other way around, then it crashes. So I assume that this is probably the issue. But then this one crashes on the, gives this warning here. But then this one crashes when you run the game, I think. And when you try to change the slider. So I think that's pretty much what's happening. Because of the order, now it creates the, it's the other way around here though. So maybe it's something else. But I do think it's something related to this. It's just not very clear what it is yet. So like it shouldn't be calling the function then. Or maybe this time it should be calling, so I think this is the situation. So it calls the function when you put custom physics before Graph3D, because initialize custom physics first, then custom physics runs the signal, which emits the other signal, the global signal, and then it gives a warning message because it stops there. But when you put the Graph3D first, it doesn't run the warning message, and then it crashes because there's something going on here on this function here, which is basically a copy of the normal signals that makes it try to access a part in memory that doesn't exist. But the reason, the thing that is weird is why. Because if it did connect, you should have the callable. So it might be because of, it's kind of hard to, hey, what's up? It's kind of hard to know. So now you crash the whole thing. It crashes the whole engine. So obviously, like the easiest thing to do, which I think I already did, but I'm just gonna show here. Just comment this out and then see. It's not gonna crash, but obviously then it's not what I want, because obviously what I want is to connect the event with the functionality that is gonna move the state or change the state of the graph. I have no idea about cyber physical systems. Do you have questions though? What about them you want to learn? This line between cyber and physical is kind of weird. It's the same line, same thing with drugs and artificial and natural, because the line is completely arbitrary, so it's always relative. And what about it? Not getting much information online. What's the scope and industrial exposure, and what are the fields we have to work in. It's kind of difficult to know, I think. So here it works here, but obviously it doesn't have anything. So for that reason, it makes me think that it's very likely that the thing there is the issue that I'm having. So it has to be related to this order of what thing connects the thing first, and something to do also with the functionality because even when I connect the graph first, the Graph3D, it doesn't emit, when I connect first, it doesn't throw the error, but then it crashes the thing. So it has to be something to do with this functionality here, I think. I don't think it has, it can't be this, because then I think it wouldn't crash, it would just not work. So it has to be something to do with the callables and the instance of the class, I think, that the function is associated with. Because the function pointer and the class instance are decoupled from each other. That's the thing. So I think that's where probably the issue is. But I have no idea why. So I'm not really sure what to test as well. I think one thing that I could do is just put another condition. I could put a condition on the other function, on this function here. So even before it runs the other one, it just checks, just see the scope and the name here. And then it breaks. So move the conditions that I have here on there. But I don't think that would solve the thing. And the thing is, I not only want to solve, but I want to understand like what the problem is. So I'm gonna have to spend some time thinking. But for the thing that somebody's saying about the cyber physical and the classification of things, like this is something that thanks man for the heart. This is something that I think a lot of people struggle with, like, and it's kind of weird to me because, but maybe it's because I've spent a bunch of time studying a bunch of things, a bunch of different things. So looking now at it, it seems more natural to me. But like you have to realize that all the lines you put on everything else, like all the lines you put on everything are completely arbitrary and subjective, because you're projecting into reality the concepts you have, which is just the gravitational force of your identity. So there is no separation in reality between anything. It's like everything is one, because all the distinctions are relative. So the distinctions between topics, for example, like physics, psychology, and these things like that, they don't really exist in reality. It's just a projection of your current knowledge framework. So I don't like to think more. I don't like to think that much in this kind of sense, where obviously you have to operate to that extent. Like to a certain extent, you have to operate under this lens because you exist in society. But it's not very good to learn things because it makes you. It makes it less likely that you're going to be able to understand how things work, because you're going to be viewing things under this lens of, like, oh, I only care about physics, I don't care about philosophy. But that doesn't make any sense, because physics is philosophy, which is everything else, because everything's connected. So it's the same with cybersecurity and also artificial and natural, and what is considered as a drug or not a drug, because everything's connected. So the main difference between a drug and not a drug is the frequency of intake and how much harmony the thing has with your body. And yeah, so the symbiosis of the chemical and your body and the frequency in which you are exposed to that. So you can view food and water as a drug, for example, because you need it to survive and you use it very often, but it's not considered a bad thing because it is symbiotic with your body. So the chemistry of the food you eat, and this is where the nuance is going to come, because there's going to be a gradient, and then along that gradient, there's going to be some foods that are bad for you. But that's where it converges towards infinity, and that's why you have subjectivity, and that's why that's when science gets corrupted because of the game of power. So because for each individual is going to be different, and there are going to be archetypes, which are the gravitational force of the collective consciousness, which is the parts that remain consistent across space and time. And those parts are going to be more likely should be true because they have the gravitational force, so they have more density, which makes it seem that they are more reliable, so more objective. But you're going to have this spectrum, and it's going to be the same with everything else. So cybersecurity and all other domains of technology is just going to be an arbitrary gradient, a classification that people put into things. And it's not a good way to think about it, because you're looking at it at the side effects and not the cause. So when you focus on the side effects and not the cause, you're always going to be delusional because you're focusing on something that you can't control. It's the same thing with focusing on money. So you can't control money because money is a byproduct, and it's the same on poker. When you're trying to play poker to win hands, you're going to lose because you're not focusing on the strategy. So whether you win or lose a hand doesn't matter, because you have no control over that. It's just the variance of the game. You have to look into the strategy, because the strategy is the thing that is going to maximize the probability that you are going to win more often. And it's also related to the pot odds, which is the risk-reward ratio you have on each bet you take. So it's not, there's a lot of situations where you can lose more often, but the times you win make up for those losses and also give you a profit. And those are usually the times where it's the hardest to make the decisions and where there's the most gain as well. Because it's not natural for human beings to do that, because in our unconscious mind and our intuition, we are designed to try to avoid risk and maximize energy efficiency. So we are always biased towards things that look safer on the short term. So, and I think it's the same kind of logic when with this thing about cybersecurity and trying to identify the areas. You should look for the fundamentals, not the concepts. So ask yourself, what are the fundamentals of the thing you're trying to understand? And very likely what you're going to get into is going to be physics, mathematics, and philosophy, because that's the grounds of everything. So it's always a symmetry as well. So you have spirituality on one end and then science on the other. And they are reflections of each other, which are a projection of your experience right now. Because the line always converges towards infinity, because reality has infinite potential. So the computation of the presence is the relative distinction. That is the line, that is always a convergence, which is the essence of space and time, just computation. So one thing that this one is kind of annoying to get, because the F12 doesn't get you to the correct definition because of the way usually you're gonna initialize a callable with a macro that they use, and that is gonna make it so that you create one custom callable and then you use that custom callable to initialize the normal callable, which makes the functionality of the callable change so that you hit this control flow here as well. And I did a stream explaining this, I think, some time ago, which means that this call function is going to be on that custom callable. It's going to be coming from the custom callable, that it doesn't go through on the definition here. This is not the... This is when you use the bind at the time you call the macro to bind the arguments. When you connect the function to the signal. So usually it's going to be the other one that is called. So I think that the issue is here, but the problem is that like how can I test? Because I want to understand. So I think what is happening is that it's trying to call the function from a class that doesn't exist, but it's kind of weird because. So maybe I should test before that. I should. I'm gonna close this. So before, actually, let me open again because I need to change. I'm gonna show when I change the order of the nodes, that is gonna crash the thing without even. It's gonna crash on the editor, without even opening the game. So I'm gonna uncomment this, and I'm going to. I think that's all I have to do there. So it's gonna connect the. It's gonna try to connect. I don't remember which order it is, but let me see there. It's gonna be easier with after AC. I think now is custom physics first. Yes, so it's gonna connect the signal successfully, but then when I try to, then it's gonna crash for whatever reason. That's the weird part. I think when the editor initializes the nodes, it does call the custom physics function that is triggered by the signal, because if it didn't call, then the warning messages wouldn't show there. So if the custom physics is above on the tree hierarchy, then the Graph3D is gonna try to emit the signal, and then it's gonna hit the warning messages, which is gonna prevent it from trying to call the callback function. But then it crashes when you run the game, because when you run the game, both nodes exist. But I think the order in which they were assigned matters, but I'm not really sure why. Because like for the point of view of the emit signal function, it shouldn't matter when the thing connected to the signals, because it's just gonna send the signal, and then whatever callable exists on the linked list that the global signal says is going to try to call its callback function with the arguments. So let me change the order here. So move this one down. And I think if I move this down and then I recompile, after uncommenting the function there, the mid-signal function, it's just going to crash from the editor, if I remember correctly. So this would mean that the Graph3D is connecting the signal first, and then this one emits the signal. And then I think that there is a memory problem, because it tries to call the callback function, but for whatever reason, it can't get access to the Graph3D class. So I think that's what's happening. So I have to task. So the key to understand this is on the callable, I think. Let me see. Oh, the other thing, I'm gonna share this, because I talked about one guy there that I found that talks about the electromagnetic field, and especially after the Terence Howard thing. I think that's the difference. Yeah, I prefer this guy approach over Terence Howard, even though I think they're both on the right direction. But I watched some streams from this guy, and I think that they're very valuable. Now, obviously, I don't know if he is right or not, but I think that what I like that he said, and I agree with very much, is that you shouldn't try to convince people about these ideas. So you shouldn't, like the main priority should be to develop technology, because technology rules everything. So economics is not strong enough to regulate technology, and technology controls the market. So if you're able to build technology on top of whatever idea you have, then people will be drawn to the stuff you are doing, and you won't need to convince them. So I think that's the biggest thing. And but obviously, like I do think there's value in discussing stuff that goes beyond technology, because if you only discuss things that work with technology, then you're going to be trapped in the paradigm of science, which is the self-fulfilling prophecy of experimentation, which is the connection of past and future over a reference frame of a network. So if you don't want to be trapped by that, and you want to expand your horizons, like to live on the line between the known and unknown, then obviously you need to be more open-minded and entertain things that you can't prove. But then that's very dangerous as well, and that's why I think that like the more attention you have, the more tricky it becomes, because based on the Pareto distribution and the way that genetics evolves over environments and the Occam's razor, most people are not going to be able to exist on the unknown, because they don't have enough processing power to do that. So they can't sit on uncertainty, which means that the default response, and this I think is perfectly highlighted on the Terence Howard event, when he said that 1 × 1 = 2, and like the most people natural response is going to be to ridicule him, because they don't want to exist on the unknown, which is the space where you have a curious approach and you don't immediately dismiss these ideas, because you come from a position of curiosity and trying to understand more. So even though you think it's unlikely that he is correct, you are willing to, you are more curious about, instead of dismissing it right away. And I think that's what a lot of people miss. But I do think that it is a problem with like Terence Howard in the way that he did, because like when you go into a huge platform, that's just the natural consequence of saying stuff like that. So the more attention you have, the more difficult it becomes to speak the truth, because it's just most people are going to be alienated. So I think that this paradigm, scientific paradigm, should be correlated with the attention. So the more attention you have, the more incentivized you are to go more into the route of technology and the scientific paradigm, and then just you don't even need to explain things. You just show some new technology, and then people will try to work really hard to understand what you're saying, because everyone wants more power and money. So it's a lot more effective than trying to say some idea like that. And I do think that ideas like that are obviously valuable, and it's just a different space that I think you should be, like this should be. And I think for that, probably Kurt is the best, I think, that I've seen. And I think that a lot of people don't understand. My view of what Terence Howard was trying to say is that the reason why he's saying what he's saying, as far as I think, is because a lot of people take for granted mathematics, and they don't really understand that mathematics is a system, is a language built on top of assumptions. And those assumptions can be inaccurate. And that's the problem with the multiplication that he was highlighting, is that multiplication implies identity, because the notion of numbers are a reduction of reality that create an abstract space. So, for example, the number 1 signifies that you have a boundary of a thing that you classify as different than the environment. So you have the embedded assumption that you're going to have an object, which is an identity, and a quantity of that object when you multiply both of them. And that assumption is not 100% clear, because the boundary between things are always relative. So this is a problem with mathematics, is like you gain efficiency by reducing accuracy because it becomes simpler to think about it, but then you are sacrificing accuracy. So you're making the assumption every time you do these operations because they are a simplified version of reality. And I think that's what he was trying to say. A lot of people, I think a lot of people don't understand that, and that's why they judge right away. And yeah, for that reason, I like the other guy, because this guy also has like very similar ideas, and it's basically the notion that the universe is an electromagnetic field, and it's basically everything is the same thing, and it's a fractal pattern, which is a toroid. It's a donut pattern, I forgot the name, but there's a counterposition. It's asymmetrical symmetry, because the geometry of the outside is completes the geometry of the inside, even though they are not the same. So they are opposites of each other, but they complete the whole, which is the yin and yang symbol. In reality, it's just a projection of this toroidal field, which is the electromagnetic field. And that's why it's more likely that there are no straight lines on the universe, because everything is curved, because that's how infinity manifests itself on 3 dimensions, because it has to be a closed cycle. So this is the reason why the idea of the Big Bang and the heat death of the universe is very dumb, in my opinion. Because if it had an end, then it wouldn't be able to begin. And that's the reason why, when you have the mathematics that we have, it leads to a lot of things that don't make a lot of sense, because you're starting with faulty assumptions. And I think that's the new frontier of mathematics that people are exploring. So I do think that it's possible for 1 × 1 = 2. And I think that it's very worth it and very valuable to explore this direction of questioning the assumptions behind mathematics and trying to develop a new framework, because mathematics is just a projection of the network of human beings that creates a universal symbolic representation that is a lower resolution of reality. But I think a podcast like his podcast is probably a lot better to talk about this, because it's more likely that people here are going to be more balanced in their range of open-mindedness and closed-mindedness. So they will be able to entertain ideas that might seem very dumb at the surface, but maybe have a lot of value underneath. I'll be right back. Let me show this first because I think it's gonna crash, but I don't remember really well. So now I changed the order of the... I put the Graph3D on top and the other one on the bottom. So it means the Graph3D is going to connect the signal first. Then the other one is going to try to emit, and it's probably going to crash. But maybe it doesn't, because I don't remember really well. I also think it's kind of weird to say that there are no straight lines of the universe and that everything is curved, because it's always a matter of perspective. So everything is always a paradox. So it's a principle of non-duality. So because a concept itself and knowledge itself can only be derived by the reference frame of an experience. So by definition, it's always a closed loop that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the shape of something is always a projection of the dimensions of experience that something has. And it's always going to be a network because reality is connected. So if it wasn't a network, it is a network through the lens of humans, because on 3 dimensions, because that's how we experience reality. So if you have a field of experience, it has to have connections. Those connections will be relative, and they will have the distribution of density. It is a reflection of the connection of the experience, which is a graph network. And that creates the symbolic representation, which is geometry, which mathematics is built on top of, which is very similar to programming because it's pretty much the same thing. It's just a computation of a network that creates a projection, which is the symbolic representation, over the rule set, which is the synchronicity of the network, which is how the network has connection with itself, because that's the only way you're going to have experience. Because if something is so distant from you that its experience is completely different than yours, then there is no point of connection between your reference frame and their reference frame, which means you can't have a shared understanding of things. So by definition, the language is going to be the synchronicity of the network that is able to perceive itself over the field. I'll be right back. Next thing to test is to comment this out, I think. Because then I'm gonna be able to know if this is the reason. So let me do that. Then once I do that, I think it's probably, yeah, I guess it's not gonna crash. Because the only thing that makes sense in my mind is that it's gonna try to call something that doesn't exist. And that's why it's crashing. So it's something related to the class instance, and it might be because of the object ID. Or maybe I'm disconnecting here. I think this is another interesting thing to do. So I'm gonna uncomment this disconnect here, and then I'm gonna see. So first, let me try like this. Then I'm going to comment the disconnect, because it might be that because of the nature of the cycles. But the thing is that is kind of weird is that they both should be on the same sync. So you shouldn't run the disconnect before it emits. But maybe it does that for whatever reason. So it creates a graph, then disconnects, then the other one emits, and then it doesn't have. It might be because of that. But this should be erasing the callable from the list that has the signal, the scope and the signal. So this is a list of callables, if I remember correctly, that is stored. So this is a map of a map that keeps track of the. So the first one is the scope, the other one is the signal, and the other one is a list of callable, which is all callbacks that have to run for that signal every time it is emitted. So when it disconnects, it should be erasing the callable from here. So it might be something to do with the object ID and the life cycle of the objects, but I'm not really sure. I don't think that makes a lot of sense, because here I am looping over all the callables, and then I'm filtering them based on the ID of the object, which I'm getting from the target, from the callback. So I get the object from the callback, and then I get the instance ID. And then I compare with the one that I'm passing to disconnect the signal here. And if they are the same, then I erase. So it might be because they are not the same. But they should be the same, because I'm connecting and disconnecting from the same thing. But maybe this is not very good, because for whatever reason, there might be a difference. So now I have to see. So the question would be, so like based on the way that I did, so the callable is going to retrieve the object ID from the instance that I pass here, whatever you pass here, which in this case is going to be this, which is the instance of this class here. And then this is going to be the object, so the get object is going to get this instance here. And then I'm getting the ID from this. And the ID, the get object ID, I think, or whatever I have there, comes from the object class, which is the base class of everything. So, oh, now it's changing. Yeah, because I comment the thing. So it should be the stuff that I'm thinking about, which is the when it calls there. Is this line the problem? And the problem is that it's trying to call a function from a wrong instance. So the thing is, the callable should exist. Hey, what's up? So it could be a situation where this is wrong because the callable exists, but no, but yeah, the callable exists, but maybe the ID is different. So even though I'm trying to disconnect, is not erasing the callable, even though the object's being deleted because the ID is different. So this is kind of the problem because I do have like it's kind of a hard thing to figure out as well. I do remember that I spent a bunch of time on this because like based on this it becomes decoupled because there's more space for making mistakes because the thing you pass here has to be the same as this one, but they are decoupled, and then it's going to involve the life cycle of everything, which makes it harder to it makes it more likely that you're gonna get mistakes. Hey man, thank you. Oh, Nihon Pro, that's what you want. Someone is saying, I think should say their name. I don't know, man. I kind of like these kinds of things. I'm probably not going to do that again. Say people's name because it's like giving people shout out because it's kind of like the same philosophy of taking a picture with someone really famous. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense, I think. So I usually don't like those kinds of things. And I think I'm gonna try to avoid this because it comes from the illusion that like putting someone on the pedestal or both putting people on the pedestal or hating on them is just projection because everyone has a good and a bad side because that's how the universe works. So, and I think that is like you're not going to be able to not do that because everyone does that because it's natural, just how human beings organize themselves. But it can become dangerous if you're not self-aware of that and that you're doing that because then what's going to happen is that it's going to snowball eventually. So, but yeah, don't worry about it. So, yeah, I'm thankful and grateful, but just keep that in mind. Be careful with these kind of things. Yo, man. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm gonna see if I can print the comparison there of the IDs to see if they're correct. Actually, probably the easiest thing to do first is to disconnect or to uncomment the disconnect first to see if it's gonna break. So obviously that means that it probably, I mean, it can still be a problem, but I think the issue has to be something else. So let me think about it. So maybe one thing that I can do is to change the parameters here and just put a float. Because it's weird because it was working before. So it might be the arguments, the problem. But I think it's more likely to be the class. But I'm not really sure though. Because if it was working before, so I'm just gonna put a float here, and then I'm gonna send like a value there. Yeah, so this should reduce. So if this doesn't work, then I think it's very likely that it is the connection between the instance of the class and the function. Oh, parameter name here. Because I think last time that I tested this, I was doing pretty much, like I didn't do many things with this. And it was working. So it might be just, because the time that I tested, I think I was just sending a float. And I was testing with the button. So I don't remember really well if I tested with the slider to send the signal. I think I was testing with a button class that I created, just like a simple class to just test to see whether or not the signal was gonna work. And I think I was passing only a float. So it might be something to do. Yeah, if it is because of the parameters, then it's gonna be very annoying. Because then I might have to spend a bunch of time studying the variant class and stuff like that. So it's interesting that it's showing the error here as well. even though the graph is supposed to be on top, which means it should be connecting first. So I think there's something like it probably calls the thing twice, I think, for some reason, because like I do remember I studied the cycle of how Godot adds the nodes to the scene, but I don't remember really well. I do know that it uses the name of the cell that it creates from one class that the editor has, and then uses some class DB functions to retrieve the type based on the name that they have. And then it builds the class from class DB functionality. So it retrieves the type using class DB based on the name. Then based on the type, it retrieves the methods of the class and the properties based on other functions that it has from class DB, I think. And they build the class, the node based on that. But I don't remember really well if it does that more than one time, but I think it should make that more than one time, because I was seeing the error there on the bottom. So I think that what is happening, but I'm not really sure though. So it's connecting the graph to the signal, then it emits the signal one time, but then that wouldn't make sense because it wouldn't crash the thing. So if the graph is connecting first, it might be connecting the physics first before the graph connects, but that also is kind of weird. Yeah, so yeah, but it's still, so it shouldn't be since it's the simplest type and I'm just passing the value here, it should be the connection between the class and which is kind of weird as well because I don't remember changing anything from I don't remember changing anything on the global signal class since the last time that I did this, and I do remember that it was working, so. So let me think. Well, the other thing to test is yeah, so I'm gonna move this again to this function here. Yeah, because this one was emitting a normal signal, so, and because I commented out, then it's not gonna do anything. So this function is not gonna run. Yeah, but I think that's like it doesn't matter because then it's not gonna. Yeah, so maybe I was gonna try to test what happens if I put the signal here, not there. Because I think when I was putting here, it was giving a different error, but it's gonna be the same because in order for this function to run, I'm gonna have to run it from here. So like it's gonna either be the same or I'm gonna have to find a way to make it run this function. Like after I press a button or something, it runs this function just to. But the problem is that it's emitting a signal and it doesn't have, it tries to, so the callback should be subscribed, I think, which means it should have the function, but it doesn't have the instance of the class. I think that's the. So maybe it is worth it to see if I can print the disconnect. Because if the disconnect was working properly, then I think that like it's unlikely that this would be still an error, because then when this class doesn't exist because of the destructor, you would have to erase the callback from there, which means you wouldn't try to call the function. It's weird that. So the only explanation is that the class was deleted and it still has the function. It shouldn't be the function address because like it's unlikely that the function address is going to be coupled with the class, I think. So like I think there's two ways to go about it. One is to yes, so I can figure out how to log the statements on the disconnector, just see if the IDs are the same here, and it disconnects the Graph3D in the correct way. It could be the case that the IDs are correct, but this doesn't, for whatever reason, it doesn't stop it from calling here, or from emitting the signal here. But I think that's unlikely because these functions are from, I just copied the call, I'm using the same callable class that they use on the normal emit signal. So both the erase and the call P should work, I think, from the callable. So this should be erasing the, so I think that it makes more sense that is either this condition here that is not working correctly. It could be both things actually. So if it's both that is not working, and on the emit signal, but it shouldn't be the emit signal, I think, because it doesn't make sense. Since it showed the errors, I know the errors are working. So it's only a situation where the class is connected, but for whatever reason, the callable fucks up. That's the problem. So the class was deleted, but the callable still exists. That's the problem. So it should be this thing here. So yeah, I can try to see. I think the object ID should have the comparison overloaded, if I remember. Yeah, so it does have. So just gonna compare the ID for both of them. But I do remember that this is not, it might be, like, even if I manage to work, it's probably not the best. But the issue with this, and the reason why it's very annoying, I think is because of the, yeah, I have to, like, if I don't do it like this, then I think I need to track more stuff from the global signals class, because I need to have the data. So it's basically a way, I need to have a reliable way to see the references, to see the addresses of objects, to keep track and synchronize the address, the lifetime of objects from the global signals in the easiest way possible. I think, yeah, this is the part that I spent a bunch of time. And I wasn't sure. I do remember that it was kind of, like, I knew that this wasn't, that I might have problems with this in the future. I think the print line doesn't make sense. The Godot nailer doesn't make sense, but That should be inside, I think. Hmm. So yeah, yeah. You still think it's correct there because it overloads the operator, but or maybe it's yeah. So it's probably a function. They don't have functions. So I think this should probably be for assignments. I think the overloaded operator there, not really sure, but I think that's what's gonna happen. It's gonna convert the object ID into this type here because of the equal operator here. Maybe I don't need to convert to string to print here, but oh, ID. So I'm gonna try to, since you can't convert, I'm gonna try to print like this, but maybe it's the same problem. Oh, there is a function. I think that's similar to the function that I'm using there on the slider, so it's probably gonna work. The only thing is that it might not show there. I guess what I can do, this is something I was thinking about doing already, which is a very nice thing that they did, that every time you change something, the state of a node from the editor, it displays there on the editor what function was triggered. So I think so it's probably the best thing to do. So I'm gonna look for the pattern after we change the states of a node, just see if I can find the functionality that they use to do that, which is probably one of the log functions that they have. And then I can copy that and use that there for the numbers. Because the problem with print line is that I'm not really sure if it's going to show on the editor or not. I think print line shows on the... It shows on the debugger probably when you're running... Yeah, this is another thing I can do actually. Yeah, so this is actually... I'm going to do both things. So I'm going to search for the pattern there. Because I am curious about, anyway, to see how they print messages through the editor. Because obviously it's very useful. And then after I do that, I'm going to put a breakpoint here. This is one thing that is kind of annoying, but in order to use the debugger, you have to use VS Code. So I'm going to open this from VS Code and I'm going to put the breakpoint on here. The thing is, I have shown comments there as well, actually. So I'm not going to be able to see because, yeah. But let me write down, let me see the pattern and see. I'm going to add a mesh, add a graph edge. And then change whatever state here. Yeah, so the thing is, it has to be something. And the problem is all the new. It has to be something that is unique, so that is easier to find there on the editor. Let me search for this one. I do think it's different. Yeah, so this is the problem, because this is not going to show anything. I think that they are making a string, and they are using like sets and then the value of what was sets or something like that. So I can't really look for the full pattern, and it's going to be kind of annoying too. So I think that it has to be something on the class DB, because all the objects have it, and obviously on the classes that I did there, I didn't code anything on these classes to display the message. So, and it's still showing there, so it should be something on the class DB, I think, or on the object class. So I'm just gonna look for, I think object class DB is also declared on the object file. It might be these annoying functions here that are generated there on the other file. And doesn't have anything. Let me see if I can. So let's DB. So it has to be after a center. I can go from the class directly, I think. So here. I guess I can ask ChatGPT as well. The problem with, like, it's gonna be kind of inaccurate, I think. Yeah, I don't think that is correct. So maybe property list. Property info. That's the same file. So I think property list is one of the classes used to retrieve the member or the properties of classes. It's property info. Maybe this way is not the best because I think it's not gonna be directly related to the thing. It's something to do the class DB. And I do remember that there was an error some time ago. I think it was related to the global signals. Oh, maybe I should try to do this again. Yeah, but now that I look at it, I don't know. Because the problem I think I was having is whenever setting something or registering a method here, but I copy this from the way that they do it as well, and they don't register the emit signal thing. They do register this function here, and this is the one that I was debating, I think. But this one is one that doesn't call, which is the emit signal with the underscore first, which yeah, which I didn't copy because it seems that they don't call when you step over. So and the other ones, they don't register as well. So maybe I solved the stuff that I was thinking about last time, but I don't remember. But I do think that I solved probably. because this seems to be correct now. You're just registering the connect and disconnect functions. So I think it's the way that they log is probably on the class B or something like that, and it has to do with this method bind, I think, because or method bind or property list or property info, because property info is the class that holds the information for each property of the class. Then property list, I think they use to get all the properties of a class. And the method bind is for assigning functions, subscribing the functions of the class on class DB. And it works after the class is initialized, which is on the macro. When you use memnew macro, is going to call a function based on the object class there after you initialize the class. That is going to subscribe the class to the class DB, which is going to register the type on the class DB. So because it has the type, it's going to use other functions. When you use the method binder, it's going to retrieve the type from the class DB global object, and then based on that type, it's going to subscribe the function to that type. So the getters and setters you put on the class should be, oh, but actually it comes from that property. So yeah, I think it makes more sense to go over based on the add property and follow that property. Because obviously it should be something that the class DB is doing when you call the function to sat and to get. I do think that they use these macros here to print there. They always use this for everything that they want to log. So probably a variation of that I have to use. The question is what function runs. So obviously it's going to be, whenever you set or get, it's going to either be one of these. So it's going to be whatever function you have there. But this part's kind of confusing as well, because the name, it doesn't always, I don't think the name has to be exactly the same. It just has to be like the correct amount, I think. So like somehow based on the string that you put there to specify the getters and setters, is gonna find the function related to the string name that has the function, and then based on that, yeah. So let me look over here. So the P class is a class name. So it gets from classes, which is a global object that's register all the types, like I said. After you initialize the object with a memnew macro, the object class, after the object is initialized, is going to run a function, and that function is going to use a function from the macro, which is the GD class macro that you use on every class you want to subscribe to the thing. Is this macro here. This macro has a function inside of it that allows the object class to register the type you put here on the class's object, which is the global object there, based on the parent you put here. So that assigns the type here. And this global object keeps track of is a hash map that keeps track of the class name and another class that has the information for that class, which is basically the type of the class. So I think maybe it was on the same file. Yeah. So it's going to get a type from there. So this is going to be whatever type you put here, the name of the type. So in this case would be this property info here. Interesting. Yeah, I didn't study this part yet. But I guess it probably property info is going to overload something. So I guess it's going to be this. This is kind of weird. No, it's because this comes after the thing. So it's not directly calling that. Yeah. So M property is passed as a set. Yeah, so it gets the class based on this. So I guess this is gonna be dependent on whatever. Yeah, I think this is overloaded. Not overloaded, is implemented by the macro. This part is kind of confusing, but I do remember something like this. That, yeah, I had this problem exactly. So I spent a bunch of time trying to understand this, but when you press F12 to go to the definition here is going to go to object, because that's the only one that has explicitly defined this function here. But this function is also actually defined by the macro that you put there. So the macro is going to be able to get the class name based on the way you initialize there. So it's basically going to get the name based on this, which is a token. Here. So it transforms the token into a string using this token operator here. So whatever name you pass to initialize macro is going to transform into a string class. And this is going to be the definition of the function. So when he uses that before he calls this, is going to get the name based on the GD class registration for the class. So this is what's going on. And then this is the property info that you create there, which is the class. It is a property name you should pass there. It's just probably a struct that holds the information for what the property is and how it should be used, because this property hint here is used to read and write for the files that make up the scenes. So the different types tell I think both the editor and the engine how to make sense of the property to change the way that it writes on the file to cache the state. Okay, so guess the type here. This is probably gets the function that is going to be the setter based on the name you put there. Yeah, so this function is probably the one that. So I guess that this would have. So if you don't, this is a problem. I had a similar problem like this as well. So if you put add property but you don't register the function on class DB. So let's say here I have set nodes, but I don't register using class DB bind method. Then it's going to try to get the function, but it's not going to find it. And I think this is the function that does that. So based on the class name and the function name, which is a string name, is going to try to get the method bind, which is the class that contains the state for the function, based on the class DB and class name. And it saves on the method map. So the type is the class info. This holds information for the class, entire class. The method map is all the functions that the class has, which you register with the bind method. And then it tries to get the one. So the name you put here has to be the same name you use when you assign the function. So that's why it doesn't matter that much. So as long as the names are the same, you can put whatever you want, I think, because it's going to synchronize based on the name. And I think it's going to create a link between the name you put here and the address of the function. So you can put whatever you want, but it's probably better to just put the name of the function and the same name of the arguments, because obviously it's going to be easier to remember. Yeah, so it pushes back to the property list on the type. So the type is the thing on the class B, the classes. But the problem is what happens when you set the thing there. That's what I wanna understand. So maybe it's this, but I think this for. Yeah, because there isn't a direct link here, but obviously I can know based on this that the information is going to be stored as a property set get inside of the class DB, and it's going to save it on a list that it has on the type, which is a class that is used to hold information for the class. And I do remember that in some functions that they use the property list outside, they initialize a property list, then they pass to another function, and then inside of the function probably they read the file for the scene, extract the state and then convert the state into the property info for each value that they have on the scene file. And then they put each property info inside of this property list. So this should hold the information for the property. So it's just using the setter and getter to get the methods. Yeah, and then it's gonna save here. So it saves on here the functions, but obviously based on this, I can't know what's gonna happen when it. Yeah, I guess in order to know. So on the editor, you have a class called inspector, if I remember correctly. So everything is divided based on docs, and each doc is going to be a class that manages the state. So each part of the editor is going to be a class, and then the class controls the state of happens, and then obviously it's going to translate the information of the whatever displays on the UI of the editor into the class DB functionality. So I think it has to be synchronized based on the names on the editor. And then there's going to be some functionality from the class inspector to figure out, based on the class DB, what setters and getters should use to update the state. I think that's what's happening. But I'm not sure if it's worth spending the time. Obviously, the easiest way is to figure out like a unique name that I can change to just search there. But the problem is that I think the names here are going to be the name. So I think one thing that I could do is just change the name that I'm using to subscribe there and put a very unique name. And then just search based on that. Just see. But the problem is it's probably going to be based on state. So the name is not going to be explicitly declared. It's going to be based on the state of the classes that they use. So the name that is actually hard-coded is just going to be a placeholder for the symbol. But I do think that they're going to use the error. So one thing that I can do is just look for the class or the inspector class. Then I look for a log on the file, and then just. Or I can just test. I can look for error messages. I think that's probably the easiest thing to do, so I don't waste so much time. I just look for a log, or similar to this pattern here. So just puts there, and then I can test that. I'm gonna do that. Yeah. So I'm gonna look for all the patterns that have this error in the beginning, because I do remember that these macros here are declared on one file. And they're probably the ones that are used to display stuff there. So I can just find one that I think that is the most similar, and then just replace the values there. I think it is this class here. Yes, that's VS Code. It's probably going to be on this class here. Oh, this is for other stuff. The easiest thing to do is just search for the pattern. It makes more sense, I think. Because otherwise I'm just going to spend too much time. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be this error messages here. So I'm just going to search for this and close everything else. But it's actually getting a lot easier to understand how everything's connected, because I remember everything from the class DB, which I'm pretty happy about. So I guess I can go on the file to see, Because I think that the difference between some of these macros is that some of them are going to display on red and the other ones are going to, it doesn't matter that much. So let me see. I already did this. I already copied some of them on the global signals. But the thing that is kind of annoying is just figuring out what types to put here. I'm gonna be right back. Then I'm gonna think about this. Like, what I want is just to change the print line here so that it shows there. And then first I'm gonna test to see with the stuff that I have here that I don't remember really well, whether or not it's crashing again. Yeah, I'm disconnecting. So this is the problem. So yeah, it's better to just comment it out. So I comment the line that's gonna crash. Then I'm gonna be able to, next time that I compile, I'm gonna be able to, after I put these messages here and I put these values, I'm gonna be able to see if it is disconnecting correctly. So maybe I should figure out how to get the name of the class as well, to see if it is the Graph3D, but obviously it's gonna be the Graph3D because I'm only using this on the Graph3D. But I'll be right back. I think this is like, yeah, maybe I should just print the numbers, because this was one of the problems I was thinking about, like in order to have the name. But maybe I can pass the name as well. It's just, it would be more annoying, but So I can change, one of the things I can do is just change the function, the connect global signal function. So that the first argument is the name of the class. Yeah, but then, yeah, because the problem is that I would have to change the hash map. This is the part that I was thinking about last time, I think. So I wasn't sure whether or not to create another structure here, because the problem is that they become decoupled. So it becomes trickier to, because like there's a higher chance you're gonna forget to do that or whatever. So, but if I put as an argument on the connect, then it's gonna force me to put every time. But then how do I link? That's the problem. The issue is because I'm, like if I want to create another way to connect these two things because they are decoupled, I have to change the callable class. And that's the thing that is annoying. So the one thing that I can get that is easy to get that I know from the callable is the object because of the function, the connect function from normal signals. But the problem with the object is this thing about the address. And this is exactly the thing that I was thinking about last time, I think. So I think, yeah, that's the reason why, like the conclusion I got to is that the easiest thing to check is the object ID, because obviously if they, yeah, but maybe, yeah, this is the assumption that I had, I think, is that the ID from the callable would be the same ID from the class, because they are the same object. So like the moment you subscribe the callable with passing the instance, it's going to store the object, and it's going to store the object ID through the object you store there based on the instance you store. So I think that the root of the issue is probably this, is like the disconnection between the instance you subscribe here and the instance ID from the disconnect here. It's unclear if they're going to be the same, because this is going to be directly correlated with the lifetime of the objects and base, and this is going to be very annoying to figure out because it's going to depend on how the engine, which I might have to do anyway, so I'm not really sure, like figuring out how the engine updates the scenes and the connection between scenes, to understand how the engine is going to destroy and create objects, and how that's going to change the objects slots, which is a global object that they use to keep track of all the objects. But from that one, I know that they're going to use a static variable for the IDs of each one. So just going to increase by 1. So I think that it never decreases the ID, even if the objects are deleted. Because then next time you add the same object, it's just going to have a different ID, which is going to be higher. And they talk about this on one video, that they say that the trade-off that they made was you spend more memory in the way that they created everything, but you gain speed. So, which I think makes a lot of sense. So the question is, what is the easiest way to disconnect without relying too much on other stuff? So I think one thing I can do, like the first thing that came to my mind is just this changing the connect function so that the first argument that passes a string with the name of the class, for example. But then like it leads to other stuff that is kind of annoying, because I would have to figure out a system to, but maybe I can couple that with the other system that I'm going to have to create. So I'm going to have to create a function. I was planning to do this before, after all of this stuff, but basically I am planning to create a function that is a static function that is going to have the same pattern that object slots have. It has a static variable to keep track of a state of the global object that is going to change the names of the classes based on the static variable, so that it's always the same when you run from the code, the instance of the classes you create, because the name would be just a pattern, which would be the name of the class plus the ID, which I think they automatically already do. But I want to put another pattern for the classes so I'm able to differentiate the classes that I create from code and the class I create from the editor. So I could use that. I could create that now and then use that to couple that with the name of the pattern that I put here. But I don't think that's very good. So the name would be unique because it would depend on the stuff. And then I could, either way, I'm gonna have to change, I think. That's the thing. I have to change this structure here, which is kind of annoying. So I guess, yeah, maybe I thought about this as well. So I can create another class that inherits from callable instead of changing callable. And then the only thing that I do on the other class is just to put... The problem is it might fuck up the emit signal. Because other functions are based on callable, the callable class. But maybe it is the easiest way. So I create a function that inherits from callable, and then on the function I create a member variable and create settings and getters for the member variable. That is just going to keep track of the name of the class. But I think that doesn't make sense. So the easiest thing to do now is just print to see if it is reasonable what I'm saying. So let me think about this. I have to find, so I have an int here. I have to find a version of this that prints an integer. So position. Yeah, but the problem is I'm not going to be able to know based on the position. So maybe the only way is to look for here. But the problem is that these are error messages, so the setters and getters that show up there are not going to be error messages. There are other types of messages. But I guess I can do... Yeah, if I print this like this, it's going to be the same. So I can just change there. But it's based on the condition. So I can put false here. Let me try to do this. So I'm going to put false on the condition. And then I just copy the message. So I'm going to try like this. You might complain because of this. I'm just going to change to this. Oh, it's almost over. I think I'm going to stop streaming and then come back. So like take a half an hour break or something like that and then come back later. I think I'm gonna right direction here. So maybe before I do the Barnett algorithm, I should create a function to set the names because it's gonna be kind of annoying as well. I think maybe not, because I can just copy the pattern that they use on the object slots or on the class DB. The only annoying thing is just converting, and I have to fix. So those are. I think I'm probably gonna do that before because it's just annoying things that are probably not gonna, they're not that hard, but they are annoying to do. So it's better to get rid of them first before I focus on the bigger problem, which is gonna be the blind start. Because I think blind start is gonna be harder to implement. Oh, the other thing I have to do is fix the label size and figure out how to always make sure that the label is in front of the arrow. But I think it's not that big of a deal because it can rotate now. So if the label is big enough, then I think, but it is obviously better if it is in front. So I'm gonna see if there is a way to, because the problem is on 3D, so it's gonna depend on the Z direction. So every time you rotate or you pan or you zoom and stuff like that, it's gonna make it harder to always maintain the thing. And I was thinking about changing the panning functionality as well, because I don't like how on the editor, depending on the angle. So if you rotate the camera and then you try to zoom in, it's not going to go as close, because or you try to pan after you zoom, it's going to be very slow because the movements are based on the coordinates of the camera. So every time you change the coordinates, it fucks up the movement. But I think it's extremely difficult to think about how to make the panning independent of these transformations. That's probably why they did it like this. But it is kind of annoying, yeah. So I think I'm gonna change here. So I know that's create function. It sets nodes names. Well, what is the other stuff I was just thinking about? I forgot what I just said. I think panning. Let's see. But there was another thing that I just said that I was thinking about doing. Oh, label size. Oh, but I already have there. Yeah, I already have this. So let me. That's weird. So it's not showing the message, which means it's not calling the function. Did I put the wrong? Yeah, that wouldn't compile. Maybe it's this. I did not update here. Because if it's not disconnecting, it's not showing anything here. So it means that it's not running the function, the disconnect signals function. So it means that it's not destroying the graph, which obviously makes sense. It doesn't call here either. Oh, did I compile? It's weird that it's not running this function. It could be that because the names were wrong here. Or this should be... Oh, maybe this is supposed to be true. Now let me... But now I changed the thing. So I'm gonna see first. I'm gonna uncomment and see if it works. If it was just the name of the registration there, which I think is unlikely, but is worth testing. So I'm gonna test now after I compile. But it should show anyway if the problem was that it was false. Oh, so if it is true, I think it's gonna print. So it should be true, not false. Yeah. If it's not calling this function, then I think it's really weird. Because then it's gonna be because it has the callable connected, but then it still can't find the... It still can't use the instance with the function, which doesn't make sense because it's just the same pattern as the normal signals. So it should be calling this function from this instance. This is the function address, and then it calls the function of this instance with whatever parameters to pass on the mid signal. So if it's not the disconnect function that is wrong because of the lifecycle of the class, it is because for some reason on my thing there is not able to call the function from the class, even though it has the callable and the class instance still exists. So it should have the same address. Yeah, now it's probably printing the message. Target object ID. Yeah, it is printing the message. It's only printing one though. Which is kind of weird. Huh. And now it is... So maybe it was the name here. Because now it's calling here. And the order is like this. But it's weird that it's only printing one as well. Target object ID. So that's kind of strange. So maybe it should be the error for whatever reason. Here it doesn't pass correctly, maybe. But the thing is, if that was the case, then it should still print the other part of the message. Or maybe it's because there's shoe in a row here. So what I can do is comment this out and then test again. But obviously, I'm curious to see if the game's gonna break when I change the value there. Because it was crashing before on the editor. So maybe it was just the name of the registration on the bind method that was wrong. But then obviously, if I make this work, then I have to change again everything and see. Like, I'm gonna change step by step. So just put the string name again, and then change the function there. So maybe it was the name. But the weird thing is that it seems that it's not changing the value here. It should translate the mesh. It should translate, yeah, the first one. It should be translating the mesh according to the data. I don't remember. I think it didn't do anything else. Or I can comment this. So let me, yeah. Comments. I don't remember if I changed things. I'm gonna comment it out now. The other message. Just see if it prints this one, which is kind of weird that it's not printing this one. Let me see. So new value is going here, and then it's translating the mesh here. Which you guys from the children. Is the guess the first mesh is 3D. So it should translate the mesh by this value here, the first time that I changed the slider. It could be the name because it could be the name of the argument because of the registration, because obviously the signal is going to call from the class DB registration. So the class DB, the way you subscribe the method through the class DB is going to determine how the signals are called. So maybe it wasn't because I'm pretty sure that it was. So let me test this again. So comment here. Yeah, but obviously I think that's gonna work if I comment it out here. I'm curious to see if it's gonna show the message there. Because now I don't remember, like I'm pretty sure even with the thing commented out, it was failing, but I don't remember anymore. So I think it's pretty obvious that it is calling this function here because it changes the slider by default, even though I'm connecting the signal after this. So I think that it's probably creating the classes twice. That would be my guess. Either that or it sets the value anyway after the constructor of this runs, of the slider, because it has to be calling the function. So it has to be after the initial, after you call this to connect the signal. Because otherwise, even if the slider emits the signal, if you don't connect the normal signal, it's not going to run the function. So it has to be changing the value of the slider after it does a connect here. It could be either because it usually runs anyway, or because it's building everything twice. So it puts the nodes, then deletes them, and then puts them again for whatever reason. And I think that probably makes sense because it is displaying the message there from the disconnect. So I do think that is creating and deleting the nodes twice. It might be related to the cache of the editor. So now it's not showing the message. So I think what's happening is that it's not getting the... It's still weird, even if it doesn't get the thing. Because it should display the message. I guess what I can do is just remove the... I'm gonna remove this now. So remove this part from the message and see if it's gonna show there. Because the other one was showing. So what I have to do is comment the emission of the signal on the slider and then see if it's gonna print the message even when it doesn't have the thing. If it doesn't print, then it's very, very weird. And I'm pretty sure that it is running the disconnect function once because it was printing the other message. Yeah, so yeah, it's printing this one. Oh, so now it's printing signal already. So it is printing that one. But it doesn't print on the editor. Or maybe it was just because I had the two different messages. So I think now it's printing the message. Signal on already. So it is running the disconnect function. So I'm pretty sure that the problem is on the disconnect. And it's probably because of the equality check here. And it's also weird that the number is very high there. Because it should be like based on the amount of objects you have on the scene. So, but unless there's something else there, it could be because of memory or something like that. But I think it's basically the way that I'm getting here that is the problem. So the main issue here, and what I have to think about is how to fix this, is the coupling or the decoupling of the instance here and the ID here, because I'm removing signals based on the object ID from both of this. So this one removes, this one gets the object ID from whatever instance of the class exists here, and the other one is on the callable. And then for some reason, it's not, they are not the same. Oh, the other thing I was going to fix is this value here. I just remember. So this is the other thing that I had to put here. Yeah, so I think that what is happening there, the reason why it doesn't show, I'm not really sure. It should be because of this. So it's setting the value based on this, which is initialized here, which is based on the default values. Yeah, so I think that the value, It changes the value on the thing, but it doesn't change the value on the text correctly. So it might be because it runs this after. Because it changes the value again. It changes the text, but it doesn't change the value. I think that's the reason. But it's weird that it doesn't do this on the other ones. So I should look into the constructor of this. Yeah, because the label is disconnected from. Yeah, I'm setting here only. So the label, I think, is displaying correctly in the beginning. Now let me see. I think it's probably because of this conversion here, but not really sure. It should be the same value that I'm using. So I set the value of the slider. The value of the slider doesn't represent accurately the value of the label. So that's the problem there. But they're using the same value. That's the thing that is weird. And then when you change, it updates to the correct way. Yeah, so it's 0.5 here, even though the thing is almost at the end. So the 0.5 I think is correct, because I'm pretty sure that is 0.5 the default value of the data. Yeah, it's 0.5, the defaults. So it should be the value of the slider. So let me think. So it's probably because it's running this again. This is the reason. So I think Godot's code is gonna run the slider code. After it connects this, it emits the value changed, and then it sets the value of the slider again. But this should set the text. Oh, I'm not updating the label here. This is the issue. So I'm updating. Yeah, so that's the problem. So because Godot runs the code after I connect the signal, it updates the value of the text again, but it doesn't update the slider. But it should be, and maybe it updates the slider value with another value that they have there, but not with the one that I have. It's weird that's... Yeah, I think it is changing accurately here when I change, because some functionality from the slider class. So there is a disconnection between the value that I have here. So what I should do is move the set value of this slider here, and see what happens. I'm gonna test this, and then I'm going to stop streaming, and I might come back today to try to fix the stuff there. They're supposed to have the same value. The other one, I'm gonna have to, in order to fix the disconnect there, I'm pretty sure that it should be on the disconnect after all these things that I did here. So the problem should be on the disconnect, I think, on the global signals. So I have to figure out a way. Either I'm gonna add another data structure on the class, and then figure out So the key is to I want to figure out the simplest way, obviously. So the simplest way to couple the moment you connect with the moment you disconnect the class on the global signals. So if I can figure that out, then it's easy. But this is the whole problem, because I think it has to be, if it's not based on the, I think like it could be based on a string pattern, but then it increases the risk that you're gonna make a mistake. But maybe it's not that big of a deal. Oh, I guess I can. I think that probably the solution that I thought about, if it works, is gonna be the best. So what I do is create a static variable on the global signals, and then I use the static variable on the. But then I'd still need to figure out how to get that. Yeah, but I think some variation of this is probably gonna be the best. So I create a static variable on the global signals, and I figure out how to make sure that the class always uses the same static variable to connect and disconnect. But obviously the issue is how do you, what data structure you use to make sure that, because you're not going to be able to know when you disconnect. It has to be based on the class somehow. That's the problem, I think. Yeah, I think that's the reason why I use the object ID, because it's the easiest way to synchronize both. So I have to figure out if there's a way. The challenge, as always, is that there's multiple different approaches to this, I think. But the challenge is to figure out a way to couple the class, either the class address or the behavior of the class or whatever, or the behavior of the callable, anything that is connected to the class with the global signals. So that's, I'm sure that I'm using always the same stuff on the connect and disconnect to remove the class from the callables. So now it's correct. So this was the problem. I think the gravitational constants is the same thing. So I'm gonna have to change the gravitational constant. And the other ones are probably correct because they use, actually I'm not really sure, but maybe they're incorrect, but it's the same. Like it's a similar default value that Godot uses. Yeah, I'm not really sure though. I have to think about this. But the other one seems to be more correct, the values in the representation of the value on the slider. But the thing is, they all should be using the same. That's the thing that is weird. Because I'm initializing based on the pattern. Maybe they're all correct now. Yeah, I think they should all be correct. It's just because of the range changes, it looks like. But I do think that is an accurate representation probably for all of them. So that's probably fixed. Yeah, I think that fixes that. So what I'm gonna do is just create another function. Actually, I'm gonna create another function, but I'm gonna couple the initialization of both classes. On another function. And then the value I think is already correct. So I'm gonna stop here. I'm not sure if I'm gonna come back, but if I don't, I'm gonna try. Next thing that I'm gonna do is just try to fix this error on the disconnect. And like I said, I have to figure out how to synchronize connect and disconnect on the global signal with the using something unique from the class that I'm gonna be able to make sure that is the same value regardless of the life cycle. So regardless of which time each thing runs, I need to make sure that I have control over the thing, so that I always use the same value on the connect and disconnect. And I think that's the problem that I have there. And if I'm able to figure this out, then there still might be a problem with the bind set parameter class there. So I'm gonna slowly go back to the place that I had. If I figure this out, then I test and it works. I'm gonna slowly go back to the way that I had before to see if it's gonna fail at each part of the step. And then if it works, then I'm just gonna continue the list that I have there. I have here of the steps. So if I don't come back, I'm gonna continue to do this on another day, and I might come back today to continue. So see you then.